Well, our research is about mental health problems in the Netherlands before, during, and after the outbreak of this pandemic. I am Peter vanderVelden. I am from Center Data, and I prepared this presentation together with Marcel Das, the director of Center Data. Before starting, we did it not alone. A lot of researchers were involved. This is a small list of the most important research. I want to mention Philip Hyland from Ireland, Hans-Martin Goudekker, he presented yesterday from Bonn, and the rest of my colleagues are colleagues in the Netherlands. What did we do? For our research, we used the list panel. Hans-Martin Goudekker told you about it yesterday. And for those who were present yesterday, well, it is nothing new. So I will be very brief in presenting the main characteristics of this list panel. It is an online panel, a large online panel. It exists since 2007. And when you read this, then you immediately realize that you can combine all new data with data in the past. And that is a very important element of the list panel. It is based on a traditional probability sample, so it is not an opt-in panel. I think that's very important to be representative. And it includes households without internet access too. Those who do not have internet access or do not have a computer are provided with the instruments. I think that's an important element. And what is very interesting is, of course, the very high response rates after each survey, which will add to the validity of all the research findings of researchers. It is open access, as everyone can replicate our study findings, and that's, I think, an important element too. And it is funded by the Dutch Research Council. What did we do for this presentation? We used 3 waves of the list panel. T1 was in November 2019. Time 2 was in March 2020, and T3 was in June 2020. And you can see which data were used. So one was from the core study health, one was from the longitudinal victim study, and one survey, the third survey, was from the longitudinal effects of the outbreak from Hans-Martin Goudekker. Which variables did we use in this presentation? Of course, mental health. In this case, we used anxiety and depression symptoms according to the MHI-5. That's a well-known instrument and used in many research programs. Of course, employment status, because in this program, we are focused on those people who are employed. We have data on physical illness, and in this case, we were interested in heart and lung problems and diabetes. Why? Because already in February in this year, it became evident that people who are suffering from heart, lung, or diabetes are at an increased risk to become very ill when infected. So in this case, we believe it is very interesting to look at this specific group compared to other employees who do not suffer from these illnesses. And of course, the well-known control variables, age, sex, education level, ethnicity, and marital status we used as covariates in all our analysis. Something about the study sample for our presentation. About 4,000 respondents participated in all surveys. We weighted the data using the demographics of the Dutch adult population, and we weighted it using 16 demographic profiles to improve the representativeness of our findings. In total, about 1,800 respondents were employed in November 2019, and around 400 respondents suffered from the illnesses we were interested in. Okay, normally I would ask you, is everything is clear, but it is very difficult to ask and to receive answers when using Zoom. So I will continue. What did we find? Well, these are the main results. I will try to explain the figure we made. The red bars are the scores of those with diabetes or heart problems or lung problems, employed employees. The blue bars are the scores of employees not suffering from these illnesses. And I think that the pattern is very clear. The first thing you will see is that those who are suffering from health problems more often or have higher scores on anxiety and depression symptoms than employees who do not suffer from illnesses. Well, that is really nothing new. It confirms what we already know. What is the pattern that we see? Well, I think that's interesting compared to what we heard yesterday. When you look at the blue bars, this the employees without physical illness, you don't see any difference in changes. The levels are the same in November 2019, March 2020, and June 2020. There's no really change in symptom levels across the surveys. And when you look at those with physical illness, you see a small decline in symptoms, not an increase, but an incline. Sorry, not an incline, but a decrease in symptom levels. Of course, it does not tell the whole story, because from a clinical point of view, we are not interested in mean scores, but we are interested in how many people are suffering from mental health problems and how many people are suffering from persistent or chronic health problems, because those are the people we must do something for, or must be referred to mental health services. And this is the last slide. I will try to explain it briefly. It is about persistent anxiety and depression symptoms. And among those with existing symptoms, just when we look at the first blue lines, employed, no illness, when you see the percentage of about 57%, 57% of those who were suffering from symptoms in November had symptoms in March. When we look at the period March 2020 to June 2020, those who were suffering from mental health problems in March 2020, about 53, it's lower, percent was suffering from these symptoms in June. When you look at the same percentages of those with an illness, you see a comparable pattern, although the number of those with chronic problems is somewhat higher. Again, you will see that many respondents who were employed and with a physical illness had symptoms in March, among those who had symptoms in November 2019. And the same pattern you can see in March 2020 until June 2020. Well, what does it learn us? That the first slide is, well, we don't see really an increase in problems compared to some studies in the United States. And the second finding, and I'm not aware of studies that examine these patterns of chronic problems, is that we don't see really a difference between the chronicity of problems before this pandemic and after the outbreak of this pandemic. Well, that's perhaps a positive finding. So what are the main outcomes? I see that I crossed my time limit. Is that correct? Yes, I did so. I will be very brief. Well, the most things I already mentioned, having the illness is associated with higher levels. That's nothing new. There's a significant interaction effect between time and illness. That's what I show you. There's a decrease in symptom levels among those with an illness, and no change in symptom levels among those who are employed. I realize that those are important differences compared to studies, for example, or especially in the United States. But we have to realize that in general, mental disorders in the United States are much higher than in the Netherlands. To give you an example, The studies of Kessler and colleagues show that around 27% of the American population was suffering from a mental disorder in the past 12 months. In the Netherlands, it's about 17%. That's much lower. Just, I think that part of the differences may be explained by what was already present before this outbreak. And perhaps it shows something else, that's policy. We have a different policy with regard to mental health services and with regard to social welfare. Perhaps it shows something else, mainly that policy works. But that is something else. Is it clear
Okay.
for you?